Well, hello everyone for once again for another episode of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams and I'm here with my co-host Billy Thomas, and we both work in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Kentucky.
Hey, Renee, glad to be with you again today. I'm excited to be here. FromTheWoodsToday.com is getting a pretty good viewership out there, and we're so glad to have you all with us today. I think we've got another great show for you all. We've got three nice segments coming in, and we're going to be talking to Mr. Jared Brook, or Dr. Jared Brook from Purdue. He's going to be talking about the Wildlife Habitat Education Program, and Laurie's going to be introducing him a little bit better in a minute because she's been working with that program here in Kentucky. And then we're going to have Dr. Ellen Crocker talking about poison ivy. This is certainly an interesting and important plant for wildlife, but one you probably want to make sure that you can avoid so you don't have any negative interactions with it.
We don't want to interact with. They may want to eat it, but we don't want to touch it.
No doubt. And then we're going to wrap up today's show with Tree of the Week. We're going to be talking about one of our hickories, and we have a number of hickories here in Kentucky, and I will save which one it is until we get to the Tree of the Week. But, Laurie, if you don't mind to go ahead and bring up your camera and come on screen here, and then we could probably even bring Jared up a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Hey, good morning, Jared. How are you?
Morning. Doing great. How about yourself?
Good. I was talking, Jared, to Laurie a little bit earlier about this program and some of her involvement working with you in it. And, I work typically with landowners and some of our county extension agents here in the state. And while this is a youth program, it's really important to make sure that our youth understand the importance of wildlife and management. And I was going to say that a lot of times woodland owners, at least when I'm interacting with them, they have an interest in wildlife, and that can really be a driver for them wanting to manage their woods. So I'm excited about learning about this program and the opportunity to kind of bring it here to Kentucky. So, Laurie, tell me a little bit about, what you've been doing with this program and what we're going to be doing with it here in Kentucky down the road.
Sure. I just want to say we're super pleased to have Jared join us today. Jared Brook is an extension wildlife specialist with the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at Purdue University. He's going to talk, like Billy said, he's going to share with us about the 4-H FFA Wildlife Habitat Education Program. And Jared is the chair of the National WHEP, because that's what it's, Wildlife Habitat Education Program, WHEP committee. We invited Jared because he graciously conducted an initial Wildlife Habitat Education Program training for agents and FFA coaches this past spring, right before everything shut down. Because there is interest in bringing this program to Kentucky, or maybe I should say back to Kentucky. And I know we've got a couple of agents, and like Jan Gibson in Perry County, who had been involved with WHEP previously when we had it here in the state. So there's been interest in bringing it back to the state. And additionally, Kentucky's going to be hosting the National Wildlife Habitat Education competition in 2021. So we kind of want to learn more about it and get involved. So we're super pleased to have you here with us today, Jared, and thanks.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate you being on today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
Thanks for the invite. Thanks for inviting your neighbor to the north down. So I just to give me some credit with the agents in here, I did once upon a time live in Kentucky. So I was a resident of the Bluegrass State while working for the Department of Fish and Wildlife there for the state over in the western part of the state. So it's like coming back home virtually, being with the UK folks. So we can all root against IU together.
There you go.
So I'm gonna share my screen now, just to kind of, I think that the easiest thing for me to do, and especially to give everyone that's on kind of a place to go to learn more about the WHEP program, is just for me to kind of share my screen and go through the website with you. So like Laurie said, what we're talking about today is the Wildlife Habitat Education Program, which I'm going to refer to now as WHEP. It's a lot easier, saves me a little bit of breath and talking. So where we are now is we're on the WHEP.org website, super easy, 4 letters.org, and then you can get there. And this is kind of the clearinghouse for all the information that you would need to know about the Wildlife Habitat Education Program. And so what it is, and we're not going to watch this video, but if you want a better understanding of what the program is, that video gives you a pretty good insight into what it is. But essentially, this is a conservation education program For those agents and educators and ag teachers that are familiar with FFA and 4-H events, competitions, whether it's livestock judging, crop judging, land judging, soil judging, all those different programs, the easiest way for me to describe this is the wildlife judging contest. And that's actually what it started out as in the 1970s. In Tennessee, it started out as the wildlife judging contest. But instead of, like livestock judging where you're judging the animals, here in this program, we're actually evaluating the quality of different areas to provide habitat for wildlife. And so it's evolved over time since the 70s, started out as a state program in Tennessee, moved to kind of a Southeast regional competition. Then it evolved into actually a national competition in the late 80s, early 90s. 2010, we added in FFA. So now it includes both a 4-H division and an FFA division. And we've been going on ever since. So essentially, we're evaluating, we're teaching youth to evaluate habitat for wildlife so that when they go on in their future, maybe they become a wildlife biologist or maybe they work in natural resources. A lot of them probably won't, but at least they'll have a background on how they can provide a better home for wildlife, whether it's on property that they own or property that they help manage or help share their information with others. So the way the competition works is we have 4 pieces of the competition at the national level. And so the way it works is teams compete at the state level. The winning teams in each division, FFA and 4-H, then go on to represent their state at the national level. The national competition is usually the 2nd to 3rd week of July every year. And we move that competition around the country to really expose these 4-Hers and FFA members to a variety of different ecosystems and wildlife species. We were supposed to be in Kentucky this summer, but obviously with everything going on, we pushed that back to 2021. But we were in Kansas last summer. We were in Maine 2 summers ago. So we moved this competition around. But the way it works is there's 4 pieces of the competition. The first piece is what we call the Wildlife Challenge, and that's basically a general knowledge exam or quiz or test about wildlife. And that basically covers information that you'll find in the manual that we'll go over here in a minute. Has a lot to do with species ID. So how can you identify different species based on not only looking at a species, but also things like the skull, wings, all kinds of different features of wildlife species. The second piece of the competition is what we call the wildlife management practices. And the wildlife management practices is basically you're evaluating a piece of property and you're trying to determine how well that piece of property provides habitat for a given set of species, and then what management practices you can do to improve that property for that wildlife species. And that's an individual contest or individual competition. The next piece of the puzzle as far as the competition is actually the wildlife management plan. And this is a team activity. So each team consists of 3 or 4 members, and those members are given a specific piece of property. They go out into the woods, into a field. They evaluate that piece of property as it provides habitat for a variety of different wildlife species. And then they actually write a plan and draw a map on how they can improve that property for wildlife. So just like a wildlife biologist would come out and work with landowners to provide them a habitat management plan, that's what the students do in this competition. The last piece of the competition is actually oral reasons. So just like in livestock judging where you would have to defend your placings of different animals, for the oral reasons, essentially the students are asked a series of questions about their management plan and about the species in the management plan to essentially tell the judges why they decided to select the practices and do different things for those species. So that's a quick overview of the different things that are in the contests. And so one of the things I kind of wanted to show you was first show you the manual. So when you go into the website, you click on here on this national WHEP manual. it takes you to all the downloadable portions of the manual. You click this button here and you can download the full manual for free, and then you can print it out if you'd like. But this is what the competition is built off of. So everything that's in the manual is testable information for the competition. And this is what we use to guide the program. Just kind of give you a quick roll through here. This was all put together by a team of extension wildlife specialists from all over the country. Gives you a bit of a background about the program. Then it goes through all the different activities and the scoring, how to use this manual, how to prepare for a contest. And then you get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the manual, which is wildlife management terms and concepts. So it really kind of goes through sorry if I'm making you motion sick with this, but it goes into what are really important terms and concepts to know about wildlife to create a habitat management plan. Things like plant succession, habitat requirements, species diversity, all those different things. And then you get into the various ecoregions. So each state has various ecoregions. So the one that's going to be the most prominent in Kentucky is this eastern deciduous forest. It talks about a description of those ecoregions, things that are commonly occur in there, plant succession, and then you get a list of what wildlife species are associated with those ecoregions. After we have all the ecoregions, then we get into the species profile pages. So this is basically a lot of information about various wildlife species that are included in the manual. And this is actually a really good resource, not only for 4-Hers, but I actually find myself using this a lot when I'm looking up general information about certain wildlife species. And that can be things like black ducks. So it's going to give us the habitat requirements, what management practices we can actually use on a property to encourage and improve habitat for black ducks. So this is a wealth of information that's not only good for 4-Hers and FFA members, but will be good for you as agents, but also good for landowners, and even myself, I find myself using it a lot. So that's a little bit of dive into the manual. If you click on here on this study here tab, you can actually get into some really good study guides to help you if you want to get involved in WHEP, help you coach a team and lead a team. So we get into things like how do we teach learning and management practices. So it'll take you to a free Purdue Extension publication all about teaching and learning the wildlife management practices. Similarly, we can go to our developing a wildlife management plan, takes you to a guide on how to develop a wildlife habitat management plan in the context of the WHEP program. So lots of good resources here on this website. Two more things before I jump off my segment is the state resources. So you can click on any state. All the highlighted states are the states that are currently involved in WHEP. So we'd really like to add Kentucky to that list to really get a strong program going in the state. And I think there's definitely some interest from you as agents, but also interest from others like Lori and Matt Springer and others to get a program going. So if you're interested in getting involved in WHEP, you can click on this tab here. This shows you who all can compete. Anyone 8 to 19. If you're an FFA member or a 4-H member, if you're interested in coaching a team, you can be a 4-H volunteer, a 4-H agent, an A&R agent, or just a 4-H volunteer or an FFA leader. All those people can lead a team. And if you're interested in getting a program started in the state, that's where you talk to your state 4-H office. Ashley Osborne has been helpful as we've been navigating this process to really get that program started and to think about how you can bring WHEP to Kentucky. So with that, I'll just show you a couple pictures here real quick about some of the things we've been doing. So here's where we were in Kansas. This is the wildlife management plan portion where we actually go out onto a property, and the students have to tell us what they would do to that property to make it better for wildlife. So beyond being a really good educational event, it's also a really fun event that gets students from all over the country involved and they exposed to different, various different ecosystems and wildlife species. So.
Well, Jared, we greatly appreciate your presentation, and I want to remind people that if they have questions to ask Jared, that they could type them in the chat pod, and we will make sure that he can get to them. But first of all, so while people are doing that, what's the best way for people to get involved in the program?
Yeah, so I think the best way is to start at the state level, and so maybe reaching out to Lori and Matt and Ashley Osborne to see. To just let them know that they're interested in coaching a team or being involved. And that's probably the best way to get started. How it works here in Indiana is actually we have a state committee, which is made up of myself, another extension wildlife specialist, some others involved in the Forestry and Natural Resource Department at Purdue, but also the state DNR. So we have some wildlife biologists with the state that make up our state committee, and then we're the ones that kind of coordinate the state competition and coordinate at the state level.
Jared, I was going to say that manual you showed, I mean, even if you're not interested in the WHEP program, what an amazing resource that is, certainly for our woodland owners here in Kentucky and our agents as well. Like I said, that is an amazing resource, and I'll be downloading my copy immediately after this show. So
it's 250 pages of knowledge that you won't find in a lot of places, written in a way that's easily understandable and can be distilled down pretty easily. So
yeah, so
that's always a great thing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So we've had some people that said they would love to add Kentucky to your list.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, but is there anything being done virtually, if someone asked?
At the national level, not right now. We haven't done anything virtually, but we are considering maybe doing some virtual trainings for educators. And so we're doing that potentially in Indiana in the fall, doing some virtual education training events. Certainly open to doing more things virtually. Like we said, Lori and I and Matt did a training for educators and agents back in the spring. If there's interest at the state level, again, I'm certainly willing to do it again and do it virtually. This is one of my favorite things to do as an extension specialist is this program. So any way I can get more people involved, I'm all for it.
And I would ask Jared that as you all are planning your virtual trainings in Indiana, is that something we could maybe, we have agents here that might be able to join in on those since it's virtual? Would we be able
absolutely. I think that's
awesome.
The benefit of virtual, right? Is we can.
Perfect. So yeah, just let us know.
World, so.
Right, let us know those dates when they're at, and then Ashley and Matt and I can get that information out to the agents around the state. That'd be great.
Hey, Jared, I was going to say, we're going to download a copy of that manual and put it on our website for FromTheWoodsToday.com for folks, because it is an amazing resource. It really is.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, and anyone's free to print it if they'd like, but we're actually here in the near future, we're going to have purchasable copies of it. So if you want to buy a already printed out copy, we'll have those on the website too. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that'd make a great desk reference for sure, and like I said, many of our woodland owners here in Kentucky are interested in wildlife, and I think they would just eat this information up and really get a lot out of it. All right. Well, Jared, we appreciate you being with us today, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more from us here in Kentucky, and we appreciate your willingness to share the program here with the state, and thank you for all you're doing.
Yep. And if anyone has more questions, I'm sticking around for the whole thing, so you can ask at the end if you like.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much.
All right. So Renee, that was pretty interesting stuff. It really was. So I would, like Jared said, he will be around. So if you have questions later, something comes to mind, please just drop them in the chat pod. But I think we're going to switch gears a little bit now.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So we're going to talk about plants. Yes.
Something that wildlife eats, but
yes. Yeah. But people probably don't want to eat. Yeah. So we have Dr. Ellen Crocker with us today. And Ellen, hi. So Ellen's going to be talking about a plant that we need to be aware of if we're getting out in our woodlands for sure.
Yeah, so summertime is here and it's so much fun to get outside. But if you're like me, it also might mean poison ivy season and trying to avoid that. I know that I have a little one myself, a 3-year-old, and we've been learning a lot about picking this out and learning to identify poison ivy. So I wanted to share this short video with you all about poison ivy, what it looks like. Maybe you're all too familiar with it, but just in case you aren't, and then some tips on what to do if you do encounter it. So I'll share that and then take any questions related to poison ivy or other things that you're finding in your woods. So I'm sure you've all heard leaves of 3, let it be. And today we're going to be talking about poison ivy and how to avoid it and what to do if you do encounter it. So behind me is a tree that is covered with poison ivy. Poison ivy likes to grow as a vine. It can grow up trees. Here you can see it gets its name, the leaves of 3, by having 3 leaflets on 1 leaf. And in the middle it might be a little bit reddish. And you can see the vine here has hairs on it that let it adhere to that tree. However, poison ivy can also grow along the ground. It can kind of carpet things, grow in the edges along the side of a woodland. It's really versatile and can grow in a lot of different places. Great for the plant, not so much for us. About 85% of people are allergic to it and can break out with a rash, blisters if they get the oil, urushiol, on their skin. Some people aren't, and it's thought that the more exposure you have to that, the stronger your allergic reaction will be. Some people are extremely allergic, and even a little bit can really give them a severe reaction. So my #1 tip for avoiding poison ivy is learning to recognize it in its different forms, what it looks like in the spring when it's just coming out. It's kind of a greenish, reddish color, shiny leaves. What it looks like in the summer, like this, leaves might be a little bit more beaten up, but more of a greenish yellow color, and then what it looks like in the fall, more of a bright red color. So learn to recognize it and just avoid it. If you're allergic to it and you know that about yourself, just don't touch it, avoid the areas where it might be, or you can do like I'm doing right now and wear boots, long pants, long sleeve shirt. That way if you do get it on your clothes, you can wash those a little bit easier. And that kind of brings us to our second point. What do you do if you didn't see it or you know you got it on yourself? So I recommend washing up really well several times. If you know you got, you touched poison ivy, you likely got the oil on your skin. Use soap and water and maybe a washcloth or something to really scrub that area. So you can try to get that oil off. It's basically going to be like grease. Imagine grease sticking to your hands. You might not see it, but then anywhere from a few hours to a few days afterwards, that rash might appear. So if you get it on your skin, that's a good thing. Wash that area really well as soon as you can after exposure. The other thing is not only can you get it directly from contact with the plant, the leaves, the stem, you can get it easily from things that have touched that. So if you're clearing it from your yard and you get it on your shears, on your clippers, on your clothing, on your dog, anything that touches this can pick up that oil and then you can get it later. So make sure to wash all of that really well. Make sure to wash your clothing in hot water. Make sure to clean up any pets that might have encountered it or you too could pick that up. Another tip that I would have is in addition to getting the oil either directly through contact with the plant, indirectly through contact with something that's touched it, it can also be inhaled, and that can cause really, really severe reactions. So do not burn it. If you've suspected that you've inhaled it, somebody's burning it, seek medical attention. That can be really, really severe. In addition, most of the time, the reactions that people have to poison ivy, you can treat through over-the-counter medications that might make your skin itch less. They don't really help the rash, but they do make you feel less itchy. But if you're having a severe reaction, or let's say it's in your eye or some sensitive area, do seek medical attention. If you've got to remove poison ivy, I would recommend cutting it and treating it with an herbicide so it doesn't grow back up. And then if you're cutting it, be really careful about wearing protective equipment. So wear some gloves, dispose of those afterwards, clean off whatever cutting implements you're using really well so that you don't pick it up the next time you use those. So although poison ivy likes to grow up trees as a vine, it will also grow along the sides of trails. So along the side of this trail, there's lots of poison ivy, and that's the most common way that people pick it up when they're hiking. Isn't from a vine growing on a tree, but all the poison ivy growing along the side of the trail here. It looks a little different when it's growing that way, so it's good to have mental images of both. So there are several native plants that are also lookalikes to poison ivy. So not everything that has leaves of 3 is going to make you itchy and red. And this tree is a good example. It's covered with several different things that you might confuse with poison ivy, as well as poison ivy itself. So here you can see poison ivy. It's midsummer, so it's got its fruits right there, and it's kind of growing as a vine up the tree. The tree itself is a box elder, which is a type of maple that also have leaves in kind of groups of 3, a leaf with 3 leaflets on it that can look a little bit like poison ivy. In addition, you've got Virginia creeper right there. That's another vine that has really different leaf shape, but it can be confused with poison ivy. And in the fall, they both have a really bright red color. So Virginia creeper, poison ivy, and the tree itself is box elder. And you'll see it a lot of times in these roadside areas that get a fair amount of sun, growing pretty easy to miss and get it on yourself. So they can kind of carpet the ground, they can grow up trees as a vine. So here's some poison ivy growing on the ground, and if you're looking for the vines growing up the trees, you might miss it. Maybe someday this will grow as a vine and try to find a tree to grow up, but for now it's going to kind of more carpet the ground, and you can see it has these leaves of 3, as they say, so 1 leaf that has 3 leaflets on it, and I kind of look for this red stem between those leaflets. The margins are a little wavy, maybe a little bit serrated. When it's springtime, those leaves will be a reddish green, very shiny. In the summer, it gets a little bit more yellowish green, still with the red stem between those leaflets. And then in the fall, it'll be a nice red.
Thank you, Ellen, for doing that. We greatly appreciate it. And if anybody has any information that they want to type in or a question, they can type in the chat pod and for Ellen. But Ellen, I've noticed that sometimes people get confused between poison ivy and poison oak. What are the differences?
Well, from a practical perspective, you getting red and itchy, it's going to be pretty similar in that they're all poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac are all kind of in the same family. It's all the same compound, basically, that's causing you to get really irritated. But from what are you going to see when you're out in the woods? Really, in our area, what you're going to see is poison ivy. We don't have poison oak in this area. It's possible it might be in some kind of far western areas. I haven't seen it, but what I have seen is poison ivy looking really differently depending on where it's growing and the stage. I have seen a lot of poison oak from my days doing field work on the West Coast, bushwhacking through miles of it to get to a site. So unfortunately, I'm very familiar with it. And the leaves are a little different shaped. It tends to grow more as a shrub. Again, you can see poison ivy doing some of that as well. So from our purposes, we really have poison ivy. It's not as, we don't have the other ones. We do have poison sumac, but for that, you're going to look at those really wetland areas, super wet areas. It grows more like a tree or a really large shrub and is far less common.
And I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but someone asked if you have any natural antidotes like jewelweed.
Well, I have heard that about jewelweed. And certainly when I was growing up, rub some jewelweed on yourself if you think you've gotten into it. So I've heard that as well.
Okay, and they want to know if the roots of poison ivy also have the oil in them.
I would think so. I know that the stems certainly do. So if you're cutting the stem that's growing on a tree, you can definitely get it on yourself any time of year. So even if you do that in the winter when the leaves aren't out, you can still get poison ivy then. And some of those other questions about
mowing it, can you mow it?
Mowing it. I don't know if the oil is released in the air and you breathe it. Billy, have you had any experience with that?
Not from a mowing standpoint, but I did have a coworker once who had inadvertently got into poison ivy and was weed eating. And they were weed eating, and then we had strips of poison ivy all over their face where it kind of had lashed around. So
Yeah.
identifying it before you're treating or mowing would certainly be an important thing. But like you said, I think generally avoidance would be the best practice that you could do.
And does it show an accelerated growth in warmer temperatures?
I don't know about that. I mean, it certainly grows really well all through the summer. I don't know if it's related to the temperature.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that one either.
Yeah, and I think with the mowing and weed eating, if you're getting tiny little droplets of any of that on you, that's a big risk. But I don't know about the potential to inhale it or anything like that.
Do you know how long the oil stays on, like leather gloves? Was that also
I don't know exactly, but I know it will stay on for quite some time. So it's not something that's just going to, go away if you leave it a week. It can stay on there. I know from personal experience that I have gotten poison ivy a long time after something being contaminated.
Yeah, so cleansing your products or whatever you're interacting with is really important, as you mentioned, for sure.
And it's an oil. It's not something that's going to break down super readily.
And someone was wondering if there's an herbicide resistance.
I haven't heard that, but if anybody else has some personal experience with that, it's certainly possible that if you're treating something right when it's leafing out, that would maybe be the wrong time to do it. So maybe early, kind of late spring, right when those leaves are coming out, less likely to take up that herbicide because so much of that sap is moving outwards. So that's possible. I haven't heard about the July 15th date.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of people have gotten it mowing and weed eating. So that might be the hardest thing to be doing when you're when you have poison ivy around.
Well, but hopefully now people have a better understanding of what it is and they can pick it out so they could kind of avoid that, Ellen, in the future. So you probably saved a lot of people a lot of pain and discomfort with your segment.
I don't know about that, but one thing I would caution people is that I hear from a lot of people that I've never gotten it before and I'm not gonna, I'm fine. And I felt that way for many years until I did do work that exposed me to a lot of it. So I was, wading through seas of it on a daily basis, and I'd never gotten it before then. I was like, no problem. It took me like 2 weeks of that, and then I started breaking out in rashes from it. So even if you haven't gotten it before, it's something to consider. And there's a product called Technu. There are some products that you can either apply before you're exposed to them or afterwards. Now those are really intended, I think, you can also kind of wash up with them. But really, if you have access to soap and water and a washcloth, those are really good. Certainly worth looking into if you're not going to have access to those things, you're going to be in a more remote location. So, yeah.
Ellen, another question. I've gotten this from landowners and others. They say, well, when it first comes out in the spring, I eat a few of the baby leaves, and that gives me resistance through the year. And have you heard anything along those lines? Or?
I have not heard that, and I don't plan to try that. Good for them. It doesn't seem to me like I'm not a medical professional, so consult with your medical professional. I certainly am not going to try that.
Right. Yeah. I told them I've never tried it either, but if it works for you, that's great. Yeah.
And we were just talking about the animals that like to eat it. And I know Jared was mentioning a few of those. Apparently it's quite popular, the berries, but I don't know about the leaves themselves, but I do know the fruit. Any wildlife experts want to comment?
Oh, Jared's not getting back on.
I'm back on, yeah. This sounds like a perfect question. All right, awesome. So deer browse it readily, surprisingly. Rabbits also really like to eat the young, tender shoots from the leaf standpoint. And the berries are eaten by several mammals and all kinds of songbirds, especially in the late summer, fall as they're migrating through. So from a wildlife standpoint, that's one reason to keep it around, but keep it around out of sight of people. So.
And it's got beautiful fall color, so
Yeah.
That's one good thing, right?
There's a place for everything, right? So no,
right.
That's good.
Well, best of luck to everyone in avoiding poison ivy this year. I'll try to do the same.
All right. Hey, Ellen, thank you so
So,
much. Really appreciate it. Yeah.
all right.
All right, Renee.
Moving on of our tree of the week this week.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about one of the hickories here in Kentucky, and we have Laurie back on camera with us. So, Laurie, we're going to be talking. There's a number of hickories in the state, and you picked one for this week.
Yes, we have in Kentucky, we've got 9 hickory species, and I picked one that is it's pretty easy to identify. I know when I took dendrology at UK, we were always happy when this was a quiz tree because you could pick it out just by looking at the bark. That made it a little easier. And what we're going to cover is shagbark hickory today. And we've got 2 of our hickories that have shaggy bark, shellbark and shagbark hickory. And like I said, it was a favorite in dendrology because you're like, okay, it's either a shell or a shagbark. I just have to count the leaflets. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy.
All right. Well, again, Laurie, we appreciate you putting these segments together. You're really building up a lot of great content on Kentucky's trees. So not only are they good for this show, but I think, they can live on and help people down the road as well. So thank you.
Excellent.
Hi there. I'm Laurie Thomas with the UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the shagbark hickory. Shagbark hickory, Caria ovata, is probably the most distinctive of all the hickories because of its loose, plated bark. It has a real shaggy appearance. Other common names include shellbark hickory, scaly bark hickory, shagbark, and upland hickory. Shagbark hickory is a medium to large size tree that commonly grows 60 to 80 feet in height and up to 20 inches in diameter. On favorable sites, the tree may grow up to 130 feet or more in height and reach up to 4 feet in diameter. It is a slow-growing tree that is intermediate in shade tolerance. Shagbark hickory has considerable timber and wildlife value. Shagbark hickory is one of the 9 Caria or hickory species found in Kentucky. It grows widely throughout the eastern and central United States. In the northern part of its range, shagbark hickory occupies drier upland slopes, and in the southern part of its range, it occupies deep, moist soils of valleys and coves. The leaves of shagbark hickory are deciduous and alternately arranged on the stem. The leaves are pinnately compound, meaning they are made up of several leaflets, and they're between 8 to 14 inches long. Shagbark hickory typically has 5, but sometimes 7 obovate leaflets, which means they're broader at the tip than at the base. The margins on the leaflets are serrated, and they are green above and pale below. Fall leaf color is an attractive golden yellow to a golden yellow-brown. The bark and the fall color make it an attractive specimen tree for large landscapes. Shagbark hickory is monoecious, meaning a tree will have both male and female flowers. The male flowers are on 2 to 3 inch long drooping catkins in the axils of the previous season's leaves. The female flowers are in short spikes in clusters at the end of the branches. The flowers bloom in the spring after the leaves have emerged and are nearly full-sized. The flowers are wind-pollinated. The fruit is a nearly round nut. They are about 1.5 to 2 inches in diameter with a thick husk. The husk has 4 distinct ribs, as you can see in the photo. They are green prior to maturity and turn brown to black as they ripen, and the fruit ripens in September to October. The husk becomes dry at maturity and splits along the 4 ribs. The enclosed nut is light brownish white. The shell is relatively thin on this sweet, delicious edible seed inside. Hickory begins seed production around 40 years of age and can continue to produce seed up to 200 years. Good seed crops occur at intervals of 1 to 3 years, with light to no seeds produced during the intervening years. The seeds are dispersed primarily by gravity, with some seeds being dispersed longer distances by squirrels and chipmunks. Hickories serve as food for many wildlife species. The nuts are preferred food of squirrels, which begin eating the nuts as they approach maturity in August until the supply is gone. Other mammals enjoy hickory nuts, including chipmunks, black bear, gray and red fox, and rabbits. Several bird species eat hickory nuts as well, including mallards and wood ducks, bobwhite, crow, blue jay, white-breasted nuthatch, red-bellied woodpeckers, and yellow-bellied sapsuckers. The mature bark of shagbark hickory is its most unique feature and is where this tree derives its common name. On young trees, the bark is smooth and gray, but as the tree grows, the bark breaks into long, wide plates that curve away from the trunk. This gives the tree a shaggy appearance, hence its common name, shagbark hickory. The wood of shagbark hickory is tough, heavy, hard, and resilient. The heartwood tends to be light to medium brown with a reddish hue, and the sapwood is a paler yellow. Boards with contrasting heartwood and sapwood create a somewhat rustic appearance that's sometimes marketed as calico hickory. The wood is considered non-durable to perishable regarding heartwood decay. It is somewhat difficult to work, but the wood responds well to steam bending, and it's among the hardest and strongest woods native to the United States. Hickory also has a very high thermal energy content when burned. Hickory wood is used for lumber and flooring, and due to its shock resistance, it's commonly used for tool handles. It's also a popular fuel wood and used to make charcoal-producing products. Hickory charcoal is used to impart hickory smoke flavor into food, particularly meat when grilling. The nuts are also used to make oils and added to food as the nut addition in treats like hickory nut pie or hickory nut bread. The national champion shagbark hickory is in Anne Arundel, Maryland. It is 191 inches in circumference, 104 feet tall, with a 99-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion shagbark hickory is located in Bullitt County, and it's 124 inches in circumference, 120 feet tall, with an 80-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest Champion Tree Register or check out the Kentucky Champion Trees at the Kentucky Division of Forestry. Now for a few fun facts about shagbark hickory. The wood was formerly used to make wheels and spokes for wagons, carriages, and early automobiles. Hickory wood was also one of the most popular woods for baseball bats in the early days of Major League Baseball, but fell out of favor due to its heavy weight, which slows down bat speed. However, you can still purchase bats from the Louisville Slugger made of hickory wood, and they said they are sold for the heavy hitters. Shagbark hickory nuts were once a staple food for some Native American peoples. They would commonly use them to make hickory milk, a nutritious staple of most of their cooking. Kentucky's forests are classified as oak hickory forest type because of the abundance of oaks and hickories. I hope you've enjoyed learning about shagbark hickory and get a chance to get out into your woodland, local park, or neighborhood and see the striking shagbark hickory.
Well, it sounds like that this tree is used for a lot of different things and is very useful for different things too. But I heard you mention a shellbark hickory and then a shagbark hickory. So what are the differences there?
Right. The biggest difference is the size of the nut. Shellbark hickory we're going to find more as a limestone species as well. So we find that a lot in the inner bluegrass and other limestone areas, but it has a larger nut. Shellbark hickory has the bark and everything's the same, but the nut is probably about 2 to 2.5 inches, maybe even a little bit larger in diameter. So it's quite a bit larger than the shagbark hickory, and it has the leaflets are different. Normally shellbark has 7, but it can have 5 to 9 leaflets, whereas our shagbark only had typically 5 leaflets. So, the number of leaflets and the size of the nut would be the biggest difference, and location. Like I said, shellbark hickory, we find that more on the limestone soils, and we'll find a lot of our shagbark hickory on more of the sandstone soils.
Yeah. It's certainly a striking tree, Laurie. It really is. And, the bark, you can see how bats and other critters could maybe use that as great habitat for, to kind of hide during the day for sure.
Yep.
So is that the only tree that kind of looks that way with the bark, or does a lot of different trees look that way as well?
That's a good, and I would, just a quick memory, and I couldn't be missing something, somebody jump in if I am, but those are two of the trees that have really that scaly or shaggy bark. Shellbark and shagbark hickory are the two that really stand out. We have a lot of other trees that have very distinctive bark, but for other reasons. Would you say, Billy, are there others that you can
No, I mean, sometimes we see white oak will, you know,
A
have
little
some
shaggy,
place,
but
or,
not
yeah,
not
but
to
not
that
nothing
degree.
to that prominence. No,
Right.
not at all, for sure.
So someone asked, what's the best way to crack the nut? I don't
Um,
know.
I don't know either. Does
Yeah.
anybody else?
Nutcracker.
Yeah, probably. I guess if you're just doing one at a time, that would probably do it. It is a
Hammer.
rather kind of thin nut.
Yeah, I was gonna say Jan said use a hammer.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I've never eaten one, but I guess they are pretty tasty apparently. So
I was gonna say I did try them. I had a professor when I was at UK, and he liked to use a lot of native nuts from our trees and make things out of them. So I've eaten it. It was a kind of a like a cornmeal bread or something, and it was really quite good. Yeah, but I didn't. Yeah, it didn't seem too different, but it was good. It tasted good.
okay. Good.
Well, great.
All
Well,
right,
thank you, Lori. We greatly appreciate you
Welcome.
coming on and
Yeah.
doing this every week. So we
I
do
know.
greatly appreciate your
Yeah.
time
It's-
doing that.
It's very enjoyable.
Yeah. You know, so folks, if you have any questions really for any of our guests today, you know, whether it be Jared or Ellen or Laurie, please use the chat pod. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, thank you very much. And please feel free to leave comments there and we will respond after the show. But we really are so thankful to have you all with us each week and being part of this show, Renee. It's great.
Definitely. And so we want everyone to join us again next Wednesday at 11 o'clock. And we're going to actually have a show on pollinators. And so butterflies, monarchs, that kind of thing. So it would be great. And you're also going to give a little information about the Woodland Owner Short Course.
Yes,
and
indeed.
so that would also be great. I know a lot of people are looking forward to what we're going to do this year for the Woodland Owner Short Course. So you're going to kind of clue them in a little bit on plans for that.
No doubt.
And then we'll have the tree of the week, like always. So
yeah.
Can't miss our tree of the week.
Yeah. All right, Renee, it looks like we've done it again. Another great show. Again, a big thanks to all of our guests. You all did a great job as usual. And Jared, welcome to the Kentucky family. We'd be happy to adopt you and bring you back here to the state. So thank you so much for being part of it. And I'm sure you'll be hearing more.
Yeah. And
All
again,
right,
don't forget, if you're an agent or an extension person and would like some extra credit, basically, for watching this show, stick around after the show and we will get you on. But always remember to go to fromthewoodstoday.com to see any past shows that you, or maybe like, what did they actually say? You know, and you can go back and watch all of those. And we have all those posted on there as soon as they become available. So
no doubt. And I was going to say, Renee, I know you've been doing a lot of work too, trying to get our YouTube page up and loaded.
Yeah.
And many of these segments have been broken out as individual segments as well. So, you know, visit our UK Forestry Extension YouTube page as well, and you can get a lot of this content. So.
Right. We're trying to make it easy so you don't have to watch the entire 45 minutes. And if you just wanted to watch a snake ID, that it's right there, and all Lori's tree of the weeks, if you need to pull one up for something, that would be very helpful for you all not to have to go through the whole show to see it. So we're trying to break those out just to make it easier for anybody who wants to watch them. Just look for Forestry Extension and you should be able to find us on YouTube.
Yep. All right, folks. Thank you again for being with us. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern time for From the Woods Today.
All right. Take care.